Hey there, and welcome back to Common Knowledge, the show where I take a look at 10 pieces of digital cardboard of the common variety and then tell you if they're any good in the Pauper format or not. Let's get started with our first card of the day. It is White Sun's Passage. One in a white for an instant, you gain 5 life. Well, that's simple, isn't it? 5 life's a good amount of life. That's a solid amount of life where this almost seems worth it, doesn't it? It's it's not quite there though. I think you're gonna do better with the oh god, I always forget the name of this card. It's like a it's like a monk, I think. Um oh man. I think it's a monk. I always forget the name of this card. It's a white card, legal and pauper, and it has gain 4 life when it enters. Lone Missionary. It is a monk. Hey, look at that. So yeah, lone missionary. You get for the same mana cost, you get a 2/1. When it enters, you gain 4 life. So 4 life isn't that much different than 5 life. Plus, you get this body that can potentially block even more damage coming at you, or if the opponent's open, swing in. So I think lone missionary just ends up being the better card 9 times out of 10. there there's a question of like maybe being able to like ephemerate a ardent elementalist or something and get this back and continue to gain life. It is instant speed, which is also nice, where obviously a creature you can only cast at sorcery speed, but you could also just ephemerate the lone missionary and not need another card to keep looping that stuff. um it's it's a tough call. I think White Sun's Passage is fine, but cards that only gain life aren't quite good enough. You'll see in a lot of pauper decks a lot of life gain for sure, because there are plenty of decks, specifically red burn decks, and any aggressive decks, I suppose, where it's nice to be able to gain some life to just allow your game plan to keep to get there before you get overrun. So you do see decks play a lot of life gain. You see Campfire get played, and that mostly gains life. But Campfire also has another function of being able to shuffle your graveyard into your library. So that is something that might also come in handy if you need it. The Lone Missionary, yes, it gains you life when it comes into play, but it's also a body that can block or attack. Pulse Marasa, it gains you 6 life, but it also returns a permanent from your graveyard to your hand. Like all of these life gain things that get played in Pauper, mostly in sideboards, but just generally anyway. Lembus, there's another one. That's a food. Yes, you can crack it and gain some life, but also you play it to scry, draw a card, and it's an artifact on the field. So there's lots of reasons to play life gain, but those reasons are hardly ever pure life gain. It's always furthering your game plan in many different ways. And I think a card that is just plain pure life gain, even if it's a good amount of life like 5 life, is probably not viable in this format. So these cards are okay, but I just don't think you play them pretty much anywhere. I wouldn't even really play them in like limited uh, or something like that. I just think there's better things you can be doing than just gaining life, solely gaining life. So I'm gonna end up giving this thing I'm gonna give it like a 1.8. And again, it is just that it is solely focused on gaining life. Maybe you can make an argument that having some sort of magecraft thing going on, or having instants and sorceries in your graveyard, but I still think you can probably find better cards than that. What is next? Otherworldly Gaze. I love the art on this card. It's so pretty. Single blue mana for an instant. It has Surveil 3. So you look at the top 3 cards of your library, put any number of them into your graveyard, and the rest on top of your library in any order. And it also flashbacks for 1 and a blue. Um, Wild that they made a double feature of this. I guess I get it. They did double features of lots of stuff, but the card art is so good that it's kind of a shame to put it in black and white and lose all this pretty colors. Um, Otherworldly Gaze is pretty solid. Pretty solid. This doesn't get played in Mono Blue Terror, but I think if you had a ban on something in Mono Blue Terror, this is potentially like one of the spells, not one of the creatures. But if I continue to have, and I'll put a little note up here, I continue to have my crusade against Mental Note, a card that I think is ridiculously expensive for no good reason, really just because it hasn't gotten many reprints. But that card is so expensive, and I think if you wanted to knock Mono Blue Terror down a peg, which or any Terror variant, which you don't have to, it's probably fine in the format. But I think I still think we should ban Mental Note and give other cards a chance to try to shine in that Mono Blue or Demir or is it Terror Shell. And I think Otherworldly Gaze is a really interesting card for that, as something that surveils cards. So you can, like, it's an instant itself, so it goes into your graveyard. Great, you want that for Terror decks. The Surveil 3 is great because you can potentially surveil multiple cards into your graveyard if you need to, instants and sorceries. If you need to get your Delver flipped, this can make sure that there is an instant or sorcery on top in the same way like a Brainstorm can. But this can stack your library in such a way where you can guarantee flipping that Delver, which is nice. One of the problems with a card like Mental Note or Thought Scour is that when you're just milling yourself, you can accidentally mill in one of your big creatures, one of your serpents, and that always feels bad if you're playing Terror. So to have this, yeah, you're still dumping stuff into your graveyard, but you can make sure those serpents stay on top and they don't go to the graveyard. So that's really useful. Plus, it has flashback. If this thing gets milled into your graveyard, if you surveil one of these, if you play this card and then you surveil another one into your graveyard, you can still flash it back. I think this card is really good. It's really, really good. It's probably not quite good enough to go into Mono Blue Terror today. I think you probably just end up having Mental Note and Thought Scour being stronger, being that they draw you a card. This does not draw you a card. That is important. But this can put a lot of stuff in your graveyard. It's really useful even in your graveyard. It's it's a really good card. I would really like to see a ban of a card in Mono Blue Terror, not because they're too strong, but because I think I want to make more room for cards like Otherworldly Gaze or Opt or lots of things that feel like they should see more play. Sleight of Hand, maybe, I don't know, but this is a good card, and even if it doesn't quite go in the Terror decks, I still want to give this a good score, knowing how powerful it can be. And there are potentially some decks that might care about surveilling or cards leaving your graveyard, and this thing can do both of those things. So there's a potential of this getting better. It also has a secret layer version. Eh, yeah, that art's pretty good too, but like, come on, you got this fantastic art by Chris Cold. Also, Chris Cold, what a great name for a blue card artist. I'm gonna give this thing a I'm gonna give it a I'm gonna give it a 5. I think this totally could go in a Pauper deck and be a solid addition to a deck. Really good card. In fact, I'm gonna write it down. I don't think I have any copies of Otherworldly Gaze, and I want one. So, or 4 rather. Otherworldly Gaze. Sweet. What's next on the agenda? It is Vanish into Eternity, 2 and a white for an instant. This spell costs 3 more to cast if it targets a creature. Exile target non-land permanent. That's interesting. Usually you find we've seen cards like this, something like Ride's End, which will cost more and then can be reduced. This one is reduced and can cost more depending on what you're doing to it. Um, Exiling a non-land permanent is pretty solid in the Pauper format. We're not dealing with planeswalkers or battles, so you're really just talking about artifacts or enchantments here. But That's not bad. And it's also not hitting the artifact lands, which would be really nice if it could exile artifact lands. But we have other ways of doing that in in white. Can you? Yeah, and you can do like dust to dust and things like that, and revoke existence. But this isn't too bad. I don't mind it. An instant speed exile target artifact or enchantment is pretty solid. 3 mana for that is okay. 2 mana for like a disenchant effect. We see those all the time. So, and adding a third mana to exile instead of destroy, okay. Having to pay an extra 3 mana to target a creature, turning this into a 6 mana spell, seems a little unnecessary. Going up 2, maybe, so then it is kind of like a reverse Ride's End. Maybe I could get a little bit more on board. That still costs a lot to target a creature, and you really want to be able to target a creature with this. There are a lot more creatures than artifacts or enchantments that you want to get rid of in the format. Great art, but it's not a. I think it has too many drawbacks, and that costing 3 more to target a creature is, that's a hell of a drawback. We can go for like a 2.9. Yeah, I don't think I quite want to give it to 3 territory, but 2.9 works for me. Hooded Kavu is 2 and a red for a 2/2 Kavu. You can pay a black mana, and this creature gains fear until end of turn. Fear means it can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and/or black creatures. It's fun. I enjoy the invasion. Hey, we're using multicolor stuff even on single color spells, monocolored spells. And that's pretty neat. I don't think this is anything all that great. 3 mana for a 2/2 feels pretty bad to begin with. I think you could probably these days. I don't think there's one in the format. We can check. Let's go back to our advanced version and just see. It wouldn't be fear, but we could give intimidate maybe, which is basically the same thing. But like a red card. Let's not even say a red card. Let's just say a creature with intimidate that's a mana value is 3. Legal and Pauper, please. And I want to have its power and toughness be 2/2. Just to see if we can find a hooded Kavu that doesn't have to pay. Yeah, I mean we kind of just have that already. Here's a 3 mana guy, 2/2 with intimidate. So that means intimidate's a little bit different than fear in that it's can't be blocked except by artifact creatures and/or creatures that share a color with it. So this would be red creatures or artifact creatures. And then Blind Zealot, which we saw somewhat recently. I remember talking about this card. Also has intimidate. That is basically just fear at that point. And then it also has an extra ability. Now, these are both, importantly, 2 pips, 2 colored pips, whereas Hooded Kavu is just 2 in a red. Is that good enough reason to have to pay to get fear each time? Probably not. And also, I don't think either of these cards are all that great either. So I can't really make a justification for this other than we're continuing to get awesome art on this episode. I'll go for just a straight 2. This is basically a grizzly bear to me. And yes, it has grizzly bear stats, but paying an extra mana to put this on the field feels pretty bad. But being able to get some evasion feels pretty good. I don't know. Maybe we bump it down a little bit. I'll go for a 1.9. But man, look at that art. What's next? Oh my god. I think we've done Rhystic Study on the show before. Have we? Have we actually done Rhystic Study? I know we've talked about Rhystic Study in other videos. Maybe not for this series. You know what? Screw it. Let's talk about Rhystic Study. Rhystic Study is 2 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, you may draw a card unless that player pays 1. You see that there are lots of mythic versions of it and rare versions of it. This list printing is common because it is taking the printing from its original, which was Prophecy. One of the most expensive Pauper cards you can buy. because of Commander. It's Commander's fault, obviously, but this is a card that is not particularly great in one-on-one. It's pretty easy for your opponent to pay for individual, or play around this and pay for the individual costs, and then you've spent 3 mana kind of doing nothing, and that doesn't feel good if you just kind of waste your turn and your opponent plays around it. Yeah, they have to play a little bit more inefficiently, but they can probably do that and spent less than the 3 mana that you spent to kind of do nothing. In Commander, it makes a lot more sense. You have 3 opponents now. There's many more spells being played. You get potential value off of all of those, and you're probably drawing a ton of cards. That's why it's a game changer. It's really good. But in Pauper formats or in one-on-one formats, it's distinctly way worse, which is one of the reasons that this was common in the first place. And from Prophecy, a set that is not particularly known for its power, this was not a very good effect back in the day. You could get tons of copies of this, but these days those copies are much more sought after, again, because of Commander. So that's why you're spending 50 bucks. In fact, I think the Prophecy one is one of the cheapest printings. I mean, it's the cheapest that we see here, but I'm pretty sure even if we go up to one of these upper ones, I think it is kind of the cheapest one. Even the list printing is much more expensive, which is wild to me. Like, why would you want the little planeswalker symbol in the bottom left if you could just have it without it and spend, $15 less for it? That just doesn't make sense to me. Let's get back to our original one here. Ristic Study, like I said, not particularly good in the Pauper format in a one-on-one capacity. What is I've seen people try it and do fun things with it. It's mostly like a flex, though, that you're that you're playing it in the first place. But if you find ways of reducing the costs of blue spells you play, something like a Sunscape Familiar, and you get to put down multiples of these. Now your opponent has to pay multiple times to stop you from drawing cards. Maybe you do end up drawing a handful of cards based on this. And like we said before, it does make your opponent's play a little less efficient. They have to, unless they want to give you cards, which they very much do not, they have to play more inefficiently over the course of this game, or spend resources to destroy this, which is kind of wasting their time as well. So it's not a terrible card, and obviously it's good in Commander. But for the Pauper format, this is just okay, and kind of nothing to write home about. Outside of, hey, isn't it cool that I can play Ristic Study in a format for all commons? Like, hey, all these cards cost 15 cents or less, and this one costs 50. Okay, sure. If you wanna spend over $200 to put 4 cards in your deck in Pauper format, I guess go ahead. You're basically just playing standard at that point. Actually, that's probably a pretty good deal for standard these days. Ristic Study, I'll give it a 3, but I don't want to go any higher than a 3. This is not a particularly good card. Expensive card, but not a particularly good card in Pauper. Next up is Stomped by the Foot. 1 and a black for an instant with a kicker. Kicker, foot. I see. Kicker is sacrifice an artifact or creature. So you may sacrifice an artifact or creature in addition to paying any other costs as you cast this spell. So target creature gets -2/-2 until end of turn, but if the spell was kicked, that creature gets -5/-5 until end of turn. Is that good? I don't know if that is good. I think we have enough other cards that do something to this effect, but potentially even better. Let's go back and see if I can show you Eaten Alive. Eaten Alive has you sacrifice a creature. Only costs 1 mana. It's a sorcery, but it's relatively close. But it has you just sacrifice a creature. You can't sacrifice an artifact to it, but it exiles target creature or planeswalker. Exiling a creature is a lot better than giving it -5/-5. But this is also instant speed. It's also more flexible in that you can sacrifice an artifact. Yeah, you are paying a little bit more for it. We have talked about how 5 is a magic number in Pauper. So many big threats are 5 toughness, and this is a way of getting rid of lots of those things. It's it's pretty good, but I don't think it's quite good enough. We have other ways of dealing with creatures. You have plenty of sacrifice effects. You have um is tragic slip? That's in the format, right? Tragic slip. Yeah, tragic slip's in the format. That's a good way of, if you have a sacrifice effect, you could give a creature -13/-13 until end of turn, and that's pretty good. Yeah, again, you have to sacrifice your own creature, but that's you can't do it with artifacts. But like this also seems better. It's also an instant. It's costs less. You can still play it without. It's a choice. There's choices to be made here, but I think we have enough choices that are probably better than Stomp by the Foot in either direction, depending on where you want to go. Yeah, it is all green. We do like that. It's playable in all the formats. But outside of that, I don't think it's all that good. It's decent though. I'll give it a 3.3. Pretty decent removal spell. Maul Splicer is 6 and a green for a 1/1 Phyrexian Human Artificer. That's terrible, right? It has to do something. Well, it does. When this creature enters, you create 2 3/3 colorless Phyrexian Golem artifact creature tokens, and Golem creatures you control have trample. So you are getting 7/7 worth of stats over 3 bodies, and 6/6 of those have trample. And that can be pretty good. I feel like I might want a 7/7 with trample over 3 bodies, 2 of which have trample. I think I want that. There's reasons why you might not want that. There's reasons why you might prefer having more bodies. If you have some kind of impact tremors effect and you just need more bodies to do more damage, that's a way that you can do that. If you have more golems in your deck, this is a Maelstrom Colossus is the cascades into this is probably pretty good. This is a golem, so you cascade into the Maul Splicer. Now you've got a 7/7 golem and two 3/3 golems, and all of them have trample. That's pretty good. If you can flicker this in some way, that's really good. Then you're getting a lot of extra value out of that. But so there's lots of things that can work. I don't think there's necessarily any one deck that loves having this. Also note that any of your changelings would also be golems, so you can potentially give trample to those creatures as well. There's something to like here, but at the end of the day, it is a 7 mana spell, and that's only so many decks can play 7 mana spells profitably. You're going to be looking at stuff like Tron, stuff like Gruul Ramp, and some of those are okay. Some of those might be all right with this, but I think overall you're probably just have access to better cards, better quality cards than this if you're going for those kinds of decks. Annoyed Altasaur, I think you're going to prefer over the Maul Splicer, and you could potentially play both, but there's only so many slots at some point, and unless you're blinking this, I don't think you're quite getting the value that you really want out of it. So it's not bad. I'll go for a 3 point. I'll go for a 3.4. I don't hate it. I'll go even higher. I'll go for a 3.7. Yeah, 3.7. That feels good. Oh, I love this little guy. Sylvok Explorer, 1 and a green for a 1/1 human druid. You can tap to add 1 mana of any color a land an opponent controls could produce. So it's like a Felwar Stone, but on a mana dork. That's fun. I just mostly remember him from Fifth Dawn, and I like his get up. I think that's just a cool look. he's not particularly good. You know, it was probably really good in Fifth Dawn. Really good's a strong word, but it was probably better in Fifth Dawn. A set with a lot of sunburst that you got extra +1/+1 counters on creatures or extra charge counters on artifact spells that you played when you played with different when you spent different colors of mana to cast that spell. So you're playing, however many colors you're playing, but your opponent is potentially playing other colors. So a Sylvok Explorer could tap for colors that you don't normally tap for, and then you can make bigger sunburst creatures. That's cool. That's a cool idea. In the Pauper format, this is a 2 mana 1/1 mana dork, and I would rather make mana of my colors than make mana of my opponent's colors. And if I'm in green, I could just play Llanowar Elves or Elvish Mystic or Findhorn Elves. There's so many options that are better for those kinds of decks. You're also, when you're thinking about that, you're thinking about Elf Ball decks now, and there are just plenty more elves, even the 3 that I mentioned, but there's plenty more after that. And this guy's a human druid, so he's losing out on some value already. He's not very good in the Pauper format. I still like him. I still do like him, but from a pure Pauper perspective, not very good. We'll go for a 2.1. He does ramp you. That's not nothing, but he's pretty bad otherwise. Break ties. We've done this one, but I'll do it again. 2 and a white for an instant. Choose one. Destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, or exile target card from a graveyard, and it has reinforce 1 for a single white, which means you can pay a white, discard this card, and put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. This is really good value. There's so many different things you can do with this card. It looks like a modal card for 3 things, but it's 4 things. There's a 4th thing here, and the 4th one kind of says uncounterable because there's no stifle effects in the format. So having this kind of reinforce, this channel style ability, an ability on the card is not casting it. So it gets around any kind of counter spell. That could be cool. Break ties is like, this is cool. Like, just look at it. It is 3 mana. That's a lot of mana for what is essentially a disenchant effect. Usually we want to pay 2 mana for that kind of effect. Green has all sorts of these kinds of cards that are 2 mana that can do this, and this. Not really do this. Some of them kind of can, like Origins and Metal Bending kind of can do this, and it has protection on it too. So there's some arguments to be made. Anyway, this is just a really versatile card. Costs more than you want, and that's going to be the issue. You probably just have more targeted style removal that you can have in your sideboard, and that's cheaper. And you can just sideboard it in when you need to, and your sideboard is big enough that you can probably have more targeted kind of stuff, more narrow stuff in there. But if you're really hurting for spaces in your sideboard for some reason, maybe you have some kind of transformative sideboard and you want to be able to do big shifts, and you just need a couple of cards that can kind of do anything and be really versatile for you. Break ties, not a terrible idea. Like, getting rid of an artifact is really good in this format. Getting rid of an enchantment is okay. Exiling a card from a graveyard can be really good. You can get rid of that Lotleth giant before it's able to be targeted. You can get rid of that Dread Return before it's able to use its flashback ability. And then also, you can't discount putting a 1/1 counter on a creature can be great too. Just changing the combat math, getting in for an extra damage, giving you that little bit of extra reach. Like, those are really solid things that a card can do. I like it. I do really like it. The biggest problem is Thraben Charm. And it's kind of funny that a Modern Horizons 2 card would then get completely outshined by a Modern Horizons 3 card. I think you're just going to find Thraben Charm is the card that's used more often. That's 2 mana. It can take out creatures, whereas this, unless it's an artifact creature or an enchantment creature, this isn't going to take out creatures. I suppose you can argue that the Reinforce does. Thraben Charm can exile an entire graveyard, not just a single card from a graveyard, it also can destroy an enchantment. So Thraben Charm generally, and when I say generally, I mean almost universally, is the better card here and played in way more decks. But I don't mind Break Ties at all. I think this probably would be a handy little sideboard piece if you are really hurting for those spaces in your sideboard. I'm gonna give this a 4. Yeah, 4. I wonder, when I did this before, did I also give it a 4? I feel like I made some of the same arguments that I did, but I don't know if I gave it the same score. Tavern Ruffian, I believe, is our last official card of the day. Yeah, I think so. Tavern Ruffian is 3 and a red for a 2/5 human warrior werewolf with Daybound. And it can transform itself into Tavern Smasher, which is a 6/5 werewolf with Nightbound. Daybound, Nightbound, we've talked about this on the show before. Daybound is if a player casts no spells during their own turn, it becomes night the next turn, so this guy would then flip over. But when it's night, if a player casts at least 2 spells during their own turn, it becomes day the next turn, which means he would flip back to his worse side. 4 mana for a 2/5, basically vanilla 2/5, is pretty bad. I don't think you want to be spending that much mana for that little power. It's good toughness, but not quite enough. If you can get it to flip over, sure, you got a 6/5 here. You got a Cryptic Serpent, which you paid maybe not less for. Cryptic Serpent can come down pretty cheaply. But having to have a card like this be at the whims of how many spells an opponent casts or how many spells you cast, you're now having to start to do all this sorts of math. Also, this is putting the day night cycle into the game, which you have to keep tracking even if these guys are gone completely. I can't remember because I was not playing during this time, so I can't remember which came first, whether it was Daybound, Nightbound, or the werewolves that actually had this text on them. Because they would say, "Hey, forget Daybound, Nightbound," but it just had this as normal Oracle text, and then it would flip, and then so it had the same Daybound, Nightbound stuff, but you didn't have to track it, or you didn't have to keep tracking it once the creature went away because it was just an ability on the creature. Daybound, Nightbound is something that you actively have to track every turn, and that sucks. I think you'll find that most people don't even want to deal with it in the first place, and I don't think there's enough of the cards that really matter, especially in Pauper. I don't think there's enough cards that really could make an impact on the format that wouldn't just be annoyance. And I don't think Tavern Ruffian is changing my mind on that, or most players' minds. This is not an amazing card. I'll go for a 2.3, and we'll do a bonus card before we call it a day. What do we have as our final card? It's Veteran's Reflexes. Single white mana for an instant. Target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn, and you untap that creature. That's pretty normal. It's a normal little effect. I feel like we get this a little bit more in blue, or at least the untapping part. Maybe not the +1/+1, although there's like +1/+1 counters and shore ups and things like that. White's a fine thing for this. The problem is I don't know if +1/+1 until end of turn is good enough. Untapping the creature to kind of give it pseudo vigilance, or using it as a surprise when your opponent attacks in and you have tapped out creatures, but hey, now I can play this and have a creature get back up and block and be better at blocking. I get it. Like, it's a decent little combat trick for that, but it's probably not quite good enough. I'd rather have like Lauren's Escape or something where I can, give hexproof and indestructible to a creature, give it some real protection. +1/+1 doesn't feel like enough protection for my money. And the untapping is fine, but I think overall you're going to find more reasons to play a card that gives some full real protection to your creature rather than these kind of combat trick things that are occasionally useful but probably mostly just aren't. It's fine, but it's nothing real special. We can go for a 2.2. Yeah, 2.2. That's it for today. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye.